Hey guys. Well,
Little editor's note, none of this audio is saved. Really, all you're missing here is Justin and George are doing their backgrounds, their intros, all of that kind of good stuff. They do cover some of the flow changes, but nothing super important here. You guys are still going to hear all about the things you need to know before you migrate from the V2 connector to the integration app.
so let's, without further ado, get
Yep.
into, the four things
Yeah.
you
Yep.
need to know.
Yeah.
So the first one we had on here was enhanced error tracking. And I think this one did come up as a surprise, if I'm not wrong, but it's not that it was a problem or that it got in the
Right.
way of the project. It's just the way that this is handled now is different, and that comes as a surprise to some of the Salesforce admins.
Yeah. So there's sort of two different things that I want to talk about in terms of the error handling. One is not really mentioned a whole lot in this article because it's not vastly different in the implementation stuff,
Yeah.
but like it's when you actually go into the system, the IA has way better error handling and way better error tracking than the V2 did. You can actually see the data that's getting passed in the error. You can actually resolve it and retry data. So just being able to go into the actual integration itself and handle errors within there is way more
better.
intuitive. Yeah. Which is great.
Oh,
Because even
absolutely.
doing some of these migrations, I go back into the V2 and I'm like,
Oh, I
woo.
mean, my personal philosophy has always been like, just spend infinity effort trying to make sure the integration is perfect and spotless and nothing can go wrong.
Mhm.
Because when the integration is live and running and records start failing to sync, troubleshooting that stuff mid-flight, I don't like doing it.
Yeah. And
It
they've
drives
taken
me crazy.
well, and they've taken a lot of the guesswork out of it,
Which is
which is
awesome.
great. Yeah, because now you get much better feedback from the systems, which I think is very helpful. So then the second piece I wanted to talk about is what we outlined here in the article. So the way that the old V2 handled it, there was a field on each of the records that would, if there was an error in between, the field in Salesforce would get populated with that error message, which was helpful. But anytime that there was a new error, if there was a new error, it would overwrite that previously
History
entered value.
tracking is not important.
Yeah. So with this new system, the way that it works is there's a related list. So it's basically a custom object, and you add the related list to the different records that you want to see the errors on. And as an error gets sent back, it creates a new record that you can then see from like an opportunity. You just look at the related list and it'll list out the errors that you got. And you have to tweak it a little bit so it'll show the error message exactly, but
Yeah.
it'll show you each instance of the different errors that you're getting. So I think that's super helpful. And someone put together this great screenshot.
Oh yeah.
Look at the
Let's oh
quality of
wow,
that.
look at
That
the
is
quality.
pure beauty.
I was
And
gonna
that's
say.
my real phone number too. 555-123-4567.
All right. Well, ladies, just so you know, he is single.
Yeah,
So
right.
555
There you
one
go.
2 3 4 5 6 7.
Yeah.
But no, and I do like that they did that, right? Because then you can see the history of the errors related
Mhm.
to a record. You can do your own garbage collection on those errors after you've resolved them. It doesn't get written over.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess really the big call out is just that it is now a related list on Salesforce. So if you've been working with the V2 connector, you just need to know, like, hey,
It's still there. You can still see it. It's just in a different spot.
yeah. So don't look for the field that the V2 connector used. Actually look for that
Mhm.
related list for the
Right.
object and add that into your layout. And then you'll be able to see it and you'll be able to dig into the details
Yeah.
captured for
And
that.
I want to add one more thing that's kind of a high level concept
Oh yeah,
here,
go for it.
which could be like improving your system. One of the things that this allows you to do is look for patterns in the errors that you're getting. If you're getting data quality errors across a bunch of stuff, even if they're kind of buried, you can run reports and look at these errors and see what kind of data issues you're having and maybe make tweaks to your actual system based off of that feedback.
That's actually really, I hadn't even thought about that. And that's really cool because I'll be honest, and not to put any of our customers down, but I
Hmm.
don't know that we've ever worked with an organization, and I'd probably be willing to bet money that there isn't an organization out there that doesn't have some amount of data quality issues,
Mhm,
right? Like
mhm.
data stewardship is not anybody's first priority.
Right.
And so
Except ours. They're pretty close. Yeah.
well, I mean, I feel like that's more just a nature of, customers don't want to do it. So they're like, make this problem go away from me,
And
right?
it becomes our problem.
Yeah. Because quite frankly, we don't want other people's data stewardship problems
Yeah,
to be our
that's true.
first priority
That's
either,
true.
which is why I think it's cool. Because it's like, yeah, run a report on your integration errors, catch your data quality issues that are breaking your integration, and then put processes in place to address those.
Mhm.
And so then, this isn't, it's an integration tool, but then you're getting like some data stewardship, some data cleansing value out of it to catch things. And since, like in this case, we're talking Salesforce-NetSuite integration with the integration app,
Mhm.
um, in my mind, that automatically like hints at or leads to the idea of sales is handing off an opportunity or a dealer or whatever to the fulfillment people in NetSuite to actually like make it happen. And so if you've got data quality issues when you're syncing stuff to NetSuite, like to me, the idea that you would capture it and you would run data stewardship now, like it's
Mhm.
like, hey, this was good enough for sales, but now we're going to make sure it's exactly right
pristine. Yeah.
before we hand it off for accounting and fulfillment and
Yep.
everything else.
Yep.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yep.
So good call out. Like
Yeah.
I didn't even think about running reports on these.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
So number two,
Mm.
and in this one,
This is a fun one.
well, I was going to say, and if you're not familiar with the V2 connector, this is a specific feature on it
Yes.
that you'll probably be lost. So we apologize for those following along at home. But effectively, in the V2 connector, there was a way that you could kind of automatically sync a Salesforce opportunity to a NetSuite sales order. Like if it was closed won or when it hit like a specific stage.
Mhm.
But if you wanted to have manual review or other things happen first before you send that over,
Yeah.
there wasn't really a good hook into that. So what they gave you was a button that you could press
Yeah.
to manually send it, and you would turn the automatic sending off. In the new integration app, they've done away with that button.
Yep.
But there's still kind of, I guess, a way to implement that. So again, like
Yeah.
you're the guy that's designed it. You want to talk about how you
Yeah.
help people meet that need in the IA?
It's actually a super simple sort of workaround.
Yeah.
That like any admin would be like, oh, this is how we do it. But at least in Salesforce, right? If you
Yeah.
don't know Celigo well enough, then you would be like, I'm not sure how. So the way that the new connector is designed, let me start with the old connector first. So with the old connector, what you could do, the V2, is you had two different options. One is you could set like automatic criteria that when an opportunity hit closed won, trigger the sync, and it would
Yeah.
run the data. A lot of folks liked that. A lot of folks implemented that. But some other folks had a process where it gets to closed won, and maybe then it goes into review. Somebody needs to look at it, make sure all the T's are dotted and the I's are crossed.
Somebody might be running data stewardship.
Yeah,
Maybe.
exactly. And then once it's good and it's approved, click the button, push the button, send it over. With the new IA, what it does is they've removed those options in terms of like the manual steps. And really at first I was like, oh, I don't know about this. This one doesn't quite seem intuitive. But the more that I got into it and the more we ran these projects, it became apparent that like, no, this is actually an improvement. So what they do is the flow is just real time.
Okay.
Period. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You can't schedule it. None of that stuff, which is fine because it's real time. Now, what you can do, and this is where the fix comes in, is you can set criteria on the actual flow itself, sort of like the closed won stage. So you can do multiple stages. You can do,
but you can do more than just stage. Like basically
Yes.
any data point on
Right.
your opportunity could be
Exactly.
a criteria.
Yeah. So like we have folks who use like the NetSuite ID field cannot be blank, for example. Like it needs to be synced over previously or something like that. Or in the case of
Like the workaround for the
our
button.
workaround, right? We just put a checkbox that says sync to NetSuite or push to NetSuite. You can name it whatever you'd like.
And it won't sync unless it's checked.
Correct. Because we put that checkbox in the criteria for the actual flow itself. So it's still real time, but you have to check the box in order for it to trigger. And that has some other implications too, because the syncs run off of an edit and save. And so if you have like automation in the background for an opportunity that you want to sync across, like let's say you're updating a quantity or something like that, as long as that checkbox is checked,
all those updates will continue to sync until you
Correct.
turn it off.
Yeah.
So it's
less
of a button and more of a
too.
switch.
Yes, exactly. Saying, hey, it's like a flag, right? This one is good to send across, send it. And then as updates go, it'll push that across too.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
So it's a simple solution.
Just something to have in your pocket if that button was important to you.
We get a lot of questions about that button. Like, hey, we use this button. It's like, I know, dude. I like the button too, but
Well, and I think that's one of the reasons we put it in as the 4 things you need to know, right? Because people ask about the button. What happened to the button?
Have you seen the article we wrote? It's in there.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna keep trucking along because I don't want us to fall too behind schedule here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, okay, I think this one's an interesting one. Number 3, right?
Yeah.
So Salesforce opportunity sync options. And I know the V2 side of this. If you don't mind, I want to spend a little time setting the table here because I remember implementing some of these.
Yeah.
So in the V2 connector for Salesforce-NetSuite and Celigo, you used to be able to sync a Salesforce opportunity to a NetSuite sales order, to a NetSuite opportunity, or to a NetSuite project.
Yep.
And they were in the V2 connector, they were all listed as separate flows. So you turned each of them on or off separately. They had their own mappings, their own configuration.
Yep.
And by and large, it was sort of a choose one type mentality in the V2 connector. You pick where you wanted to sync or what you wanted to do. And I think what we discovered and what most people probably already know is like 90% of the use cases, people go Salesforce opportunity to NetSuite sales order, which makes sense because you're going from CRM to an ERP, the people who sell stuff to the people who fulfill stuff.
Yes.
And that's kind of how that works. Now, there's been some changes in the integration app. And I say changes, but I guess really we should be honest. It's a deprecation.
Yeah.
And that Salesforce opportunity to NetSuite opportunity and Salesforce opportunity to NetSuite project are no longer included in the integration app, right?
Yep.
And so I guess maybe to hand it off to you, how do we handle that as part of like a V2 to IAM migration? What's the go-to there?
Yeah, sure. So kind of like what you said before, the way that we view these two different systems, Salesforce and NetSuite, is that Salesforce handles the sales, right? The communication, the relationships with the potential clients, potential customers. Who is your sales team working with? And the ERP, NetSuite, is designed to handle once money actually starts exchanging hands, let the accountants and the folks who do stuff I can't, let them handle the actual exchange of money. So a lot of times when we see sort of these, opportunity to opportunity or opportunity to projects requests, it's a little outside of best practices. And so we've had a few conversations where it's like, well, we want to steer you towards opportunity to sales order. And a few folks actually were on board with that.
I was going to say, I know we've definitely had a few customers we've worked with. Oh, I can't even remember, but we had the one where they wanted to sync, what was it? A NetSuite quote to Salesforce opportunity back to like a NetSuite opportunity to NetSuite sales order.
Right.
And we were talking through what the process could be.
Yeah,
and
that was a fun solutioning call.
Well, but they kind of like, because if you think about the flow of a sales data or like an opportunity all the way from like a lead to a fulfilled deal, I always envision it as like a string, right? And at the end of the day, what you want from your like just a lead all the way to like I'm making money is you just want that string to be like a straight, simple line. And so the more back and forth and stuff you have, it's almost like a tangled string. And as we talked to these guys, they were like, oh, we can make this so much simpler. And it's like,
Yeah, we started talking and they were like, we love what you're saying.
but here's what I wanted to get at.
Mm.
For those people who really care about going opportunity to opportunity, opportunity to project, is there an answer for that? Like, what do we do?
Oh yeah. So we do custom flows.
Custom flows?
That's kind of the long and short of it. It's got the same basic structure as the opportunity to sales order IA flow. You still have all of the basic fields involved. It's a matter of standing it up and doing it more manually. There's a bit of a process involved there, but it's usually a fairly light lift, especially for, not to toot my own horn here, but our company here, who we do a lot of these,
Yeah.
like we're getting to the point where this is, a fairly light lift.
And I guess that kind of makes sense, right? Because again, if 90% of the use case is everybody's going opportunity to sales order, and for those people going opportunity to opportunity or opportunity to project, and not to go back to that like tangled string analogy, but like it's going to be more complicated. It's going to be more custom, like very specific for them. So I guess the idea is like, if you're going down that road, odds are you want something very special and unique to you. So you might as well build it for you to get exactly what you want. And probably this might be a good time for me as a partner to plug, like, with the new model, when Celigo sells these IAs, they do include like a foundational package for integrator IO. So you have custom flows that are available to you that you can use that to build these. You just need to have the skill set to do it, or have a partner like Radial Spark to put that together for you to cover that gap. But so it's doable. You just got to realize you're not going to get that out of the box.
And I think that speaks to like Celigo's sort of dedication to setting everyone up for success, right? Is saying like, hey, we know that there's one or two pieces that you might need to cover with custom flows. Here's a bundle of them.
I think that's fair. And quite frankly, when I first learned that they were like that was now included basically with everything, I was like, that's actually great.
Yeah, somebody mentioned that to me and I was like, oh, really? That's awesome.
Well, and it's been so long now that I can barely remember a time before the V2 connector, but we've been Celigo partners since their very first Salesforce-NetSuite connector. I think Radial Spark has been through every version of Celigo's partner program.
Really?
And I remember, like, in the cobwebbed corners of my minds, projects where we would be delivering, and it was like, hey, it's the on the rails pre-built connector, and we go through and we do this, and then you find that like one unique little thing that we're like, oh, the connector doesn't do that. That needs to be custom. And when that comes up, to then have to be like, we have to have a conversation with your Celigo sales team to say like, hey, they need a custom flow to do this, because you don't get one out of the box. Like back then, it wasn't just blanket included. And I remember like having to facilitate those conversations. So I'll say, like, both from a partner and a customer experience, I think it's amazing that they include like a bundle of flows now, so that when those things come up, it's like, hey, the tools are already there. Just handle the work, get it done. And you're not having that like going back to the well mid project to get some extra stuff you need to finish a specific detail. Okay, we've got one more, and then we should put this to bed and take a brief moment to talk about the town hall.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So this last one, and I think this one is one that's probably very meticulous, but also just recently resolved. So maybe we don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but this is something that we made sure we included out of a more recent headache that we personally encountered on a project, where at a high level in the V2 connector, it used to be that everything that synced across its NetSuite ID wrote back to the corresponding Salesforce record. So like if we were talking opportunities, it wasn't just an opportunity to a sales order. The line item level IDs would also write back. All of that would be there. So you would have one-to-one ID pairings for any piece of data, anything you might want to do with them. In the integration app, not all of that came out of the box. And in particular, I believe sales order line item IDs were not writing back to Salesforce opportunity line item IDs. but that's changed. They've released some updates. There's maybe still some work to do there.
Yeah. And really the use case for needing that line item ID right back is pretty rare. Because a lot of times if you think about it, right, you sync an opportunity over to NetSuite. The idea is that that's closed one. It's not going to be changing. It's written in stone. Like
you're either syncing all the line items or none of them.
exactly.
Ideally.
Right. There's not going to be any iterating over that. But in a few rare cases, we've seen where folks are like, yeah, but we might need to update something. And so there's a couple of different fixes for this. And I know we talk about the custom flows here.
Yes, and it's similar to what we just talked about with like these missing opportunity to opportunity or opportunity to project. You could use one of the custom flows you have available to make sure these write backs happen and cover that need.
So then the other solution that Celigo has, actually we've been implementing for a client just this week, has been to set up a NetSuite script in the background that will trigger the backwards flow from a NetSuite sales order to a Salesforce opportunity, because then you can write directly to the line items there. So there's a couple of different ways to sort of resolve this particular gap. I would say it's whatever the client chooses, whatever your flavor is, we can work with. But
I would say if I can be opinionated, which I think I'm entitled to, I'm a chief technology officer.
I mean, if you have to.
I think it's cool that they've added something for triggering the sales order back to opportunity flow to do that right back. But having to do that with like a NetSuite script, I'm gonna get into a high level design concern for a second, but basically like separation of responsibilities or separation of concerns, right? This idea that if Celigo is responsible for the integration, in my mind, I lean a little bit towards the custom flow approach. Like you're using a consumable resource, sure. But being able to go into Celigo and see all of the integration flows there and actually
have the Celigo expert to handle that piece of the pie.
to know the whole thing, because if you do that with the NetSuite script, you have to remember that there is a NetSuite script in NetSuite that ties it together.
Yeah, or if you bring in like a new NetSuite resource who's like, what is this?
What is this? And they go ahead and they clean it up or whatever.
Yeah. And then we get a call.
Yeah. And I like getting calls, but I don't like getting those calls.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I think the idea of like visibility and making sure that like the full responsibility of the integration, like you can audit it, it's visible, you see it, all the other stuff we talked about with like error tracking and handling, right? Having that there, in my mind, I'd probably lean towards the custom flow, but I think it's really cool that with like this NetSuite scripting, they've added this ability to trigger the backsync and to do it in a way that, because I mean, if you have Salesforce opportunity going to sales order and sales order going back to opportunity, if you don't do it right, obviously you could potentially kick off like a circle of data integrations.
Yeah, there's definitely some tweaking that has to happen to that.
So the effort that they put in there, I think, is really cool. But I'm gonna say I'm a custom flow guy on that. I think that's cool.
Yeah, that's
now that does bring us to the end of our item number 4. This article is publicly available, guys. So if you want to refer to this, if you want to refer to the diagram that we had up at the top, please check this out. We love to have a conversation with you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. We do have our social media information here on the video, so go right ahead and chase us down. But let's put a wrap on the article. Let's take a couple minutes to talk about the partner town hall that just happened. And then I think we'll probably wrap for the day before we scare everybody off. So let me stop this share here. All right.
Oh, there we are. All right.
Oh yeah, we're back to us. We're back. So literally just yesterday afternoon.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as of this recording, it was like less than 24 hours ago.
Yeah, less than 24 hours ago. Celigo had their partner town hall, which is kind of like they get all of the Celigo executives, like all the way up to the CEO.
Yeah, the CEO was on there.
And they talk about their vision for Celigo. They talk about, where they're taking things, a couple key highlights, shout outs. cool accomplishments or features that they've released over this past year,
Yeah.
as well as what they've got on the roadmap for 2024.
Mhm.
And I know personally what my highlights are, what I
Mhm.
thought were cool coming out of that. But I was
Yeah.
curious to hear from you, like what were the features or the business model type things that they called out on there that kind of got your attention the most?
So I think, and here's where I think like our answers will be a little bit the same, but a little bit like different. Is that what stood out to me was how accessible Celigo is making like and making plans to make the system for folks who aren't like technically sound or have the certifications that I do or someone else at the Radio Spark does. For example, like we're going to talk about AI here for a little bit. That's the
Because
big
we
one
have to talk about AI on every
on
one of
every
these.
yeah, on every single one.
Something banner buzzword.
Yeah, AI.
AI.
So, but for me, one of the things that I experience a lot with clients when I'm on the calls with them, going through the steps of the project and really, kind of we dig our hands in to the meat of this is they a lot of times they don't understand it. They're not familiar with, okay, we're building this. Oh, okay, and the data mapping template does what?
I
And
had a feeling you were going to bring up the data
well,
mapping
yeah, I mean,
template.
that's because that's always the biggest question is like, what is the purpose of this? And it's like, well, it gets us to where we need to be. But I think that one of the things that Celigo is focusing its AI on isn't just making the product better and for guys like me who are using it every day, but also to inform people who don't have that experience as to what is going on. So like on the town
Yeah.
hall, they were talking about, well, so you can like, for example, use the SQL generator.
Oh
um,
yeah.
so you can just type in plain English what you want the SQL to do, and then it will use AI to form the code for you. And that's great. But what I'm more interested in is actually the inverse of that, where they're using AI to read the code that's in the actual connector and give you in plain English a description of what it's doing.
I think that is pretty cool.
Like, and that's just from me being like empathetic to the people who don't use this on a daily basis, coming in going, oh God, what is set up here? And then, now Celigo will spit out an answer for that.
Well, I think it's to be a developer nerd for a second, what I think is cool about that is, documenting how your integrations work or like what's available to you for the toolkit that's been provided, like all these flows, what's integrating how.
Mhm.
Outside of Celigo and their flow oriented mindset, typically with integrations, you're talking about APIs.
Yeah.
And like API documentation is critical, right? Like if people don't know how to consume your API, they can't integrate with it. Data doesn't flow, it becomes a problem. And so people have been on and on about self-documenting APIs, like the idea that you have like interactive Swagger documentation for an
Mhm.
API where it's like,
Yep.
hey, you can go in here, you can do a login request through the UI there, get a token, put it in to authenticate all your other requests, and then you can make like actual calls to endpoints and see the responses, see samples,
Yeah.
and have as a developer the ability to establish an understanding and a familiarity with like what's available and what is this API going to
Yeah.
do with each of these calls.
Yeah.
And I see that, that AI generated description for the flow is kind of being analogous to that a little bit. This idea of it's like, hey, you didn't build this, and so you might not understand it all, but I'm going to explain to you
Yeah.
what this can
Well,
do.
and that's a whole separate thing too from like the SQL piece, because like it'll tell you what the SQL is doing, but then also what they're going to start including, at least from what it sounded like on the town hall, is that they're going to start including things like descriptions of the actual flows themselves, like what you said.
That's
Yeah. And I think that's great because as someone who's gone in and looked at custom flows other people have built, a lot of times it's not readily apparent what it's doing. And a lot of times there can be nuances that
to
you
how
have to
something's
really,
been done.
yeah, you got to go dig in
Yeah.
to find those. And
I
hopefully
I've
this will make it
I've
easier.
I'll be honest, I think in my Celigo career, I will admit to have have stepped on at least one landmine in a project where I
sure.
was like, I'm pretty sure I know exactly what this flow is doing. And then
Yeah.
like an hour
And then
later, I'm
somebody
like,
gets on and they're
oh,
like,
I
"Mm-mm."
missed this one piece here that changed
You gonna learn
everything.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I learned that day.
Yeah.
So I do like that idea of, breaking it down for the business. And again, as a technical, I describe myself lately as like I'm a pocket nerd. I'm your nerd in the
Yeah.
pocket
Yeah.
because I love getting into the weeds and talking about stuff.
Hmm.
Not every business person is like that.
Right.
So I do see the value in tooling that helps explain your tech stuff to your business people so that they feel
Yeah.
comfortable and confident and they're like, okay, we understand what it is.
Or even just the stakeholders, like the folks who are actually on the calls. Because a lot of times, we get folks who aren't necessarily super tech savvy who are going like, hey, this was kind of dropped into my lap. I'm now responsible for overseeing it. I'm an accountant. Like, how do we get this across the
fair,
line?
fair.
And I think that being able to put it, I like the very brief summaries of what's going on, and then we can get into the technical weeds. So I think having something that describes what's going on for someone who may not understand all the technical side of things is super helpful. And I think that that's, again, speaks to like Celigo just being like, yeah, we're going to help you out.
And well, and I agree. I think that's something that like goes a long way to help with accessibility to understanding what's going on in your Celigo instance to
Mhm.
like to make Celigo overall more approachable. You're not seeing this like list of tiles within a list of
Yeah.
flows inside the tiles,
Yeah.
and you have a production and a sand, and you're like, what is all
Yeah, it
of
looks like a
this?
chessboard.
So to have a bit of an understanding of what each of these things are and have like AI to help you. And I know they called out, right? They want to have like a chat GPT style AI assistant that they're looking to
Yeah.
bring in so that like you could theoretically ask questions about your stuff
Mhm.
potentially and get like support and answers to help clarify, which I think is cool. And I mean, for me, like I do like that SQL AI generation
Yeah.
thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I like I'm hoping that's going to roll out in a similar level of like thoroughness for like the scripting that's possible, like when you're doing your various hooks and you're doing like, because we'll be honest, ever since we brought you onto the team, like
Mm.
the only time I directly get hands on with like a Celigo implementation is like we're gonna actually need to write some code to
Yeah.
like modify the structure of this data to be the way we need it for the next steps.
Right.
And so I'm only going in there to basically write JavaScript type code.
Yeah.
And one of the things I thought was it's been in the back of my mind for a little while is
Mm.
this idea that like Salesforce, you can do a lot as a quote unquote system admin level resource, right? You
Yeah.
don't have to be a developer. If you're comfortable with
Mm.
software configuration and like point and click options, drag and drop interfaces, you can do a lot,
Yeah.
right?
It's enough to be dangerous.
Integration's a little harder because again, like even when you're integrating with tools, something like Celigo, at the end of the day, it's like, oh, Celigo's connecting to Salesforce through the API. Like at some point, it's getting brought back down to code. And so I've always personally felt integrations, it's hard to make integration work accessible
Yeah.
to just an admin level resource. And
Yep.
Celigo, I think, has done a good job up till now doing that. But again, we get to those flows where we got to write some code to change the data structure to make some significant, like maybe there's some binary logic we need to run on the records
Yeah.
or whatever.
Or sometimes the resource just wants to write the code rather than doing the
Well,
clicking and going.
I got to
through
be
all
honest. I would argue that I feel like it's less often that people would want to write the code. It's more often that somebody would have to write the code
Yeah.
and nobody on the team would know how to.
That's
And that idea of having an AI that, and even OpenAI and ChatGPT, like they admit, right? They're like, this is not perfect.
Yeah.
You should not use the output of the AI without double checking it and stuff.
Mhm.
But to even have something that's like, let's take a stab at it, a first draft.
Yeah.
Tell me what you want to do,
Get me
and
in the
I will
ballpark.
put something in place, and then maybe a more experienced resource could come in and in a shorter period of time edit it and clean it up
Yep.
in order to deliver that, but still have more of the work pushed down to a more accessible
Yeah.
skill set.
Yeah, and it sounds like there's even more stuff that they're doing with the AI stuff too, like recommendations on flows. And
Yes. Yeah.
I think Celigo has a really good direction with AI going right now, and I'm actually really excited about it. As someone who saw us go from V2 to IA to now AI, I'm like,
V2
all right.
to IA to AI.
That's right.
They switched the letters and it changed the game.
Well, you never saw it coming.
No, well, and I mean, I have been a little, if I'm being honest, I've been a little like numbed to like buzzword mania. Like I've been around ever since like cloud was a buzzword, like in the industry, and I'm like, cloud, no, it's like the cloud, but it's closer to the ground. What is that? The fog? And you know, so the buzzwords to me, it's like they elicit more of a groan than excitement typically.
Yeah.
And AI technology is very cool, but I feel like it is a little bandwagony. But watching that town hall and like seeing what they were doing, I'm like, this is actually really cool because I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I've actually seen businesses use, just like Chat GPT or another LLM based AI, for help writing code, troubleshooting, like debugging an error in their code, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so to start seeing that level of technology being brought from generic AI tool that's like separate from everything else, to be like, we're now incorporating it into where you do the development. You have AI support. Like that's pretty cool, man.
Yeah. And it's gonna make my life so much easier. And
Which
a lot
is
of
gonna
other
make
people's
my
lives.
life.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
All right. I mean, this has been a lot of fun, but we've already blown our half-hour time limit we set for this.
Yeah.
So we're gonna wrap it in, guys. As always, appreciate you guys tuning in, checking out our content. If you have any questions, if something we said piqued your interest, if you want support, please reach out to us at engage@radiospark.com or at any of our social contacts, which you can see in the video. If you guys have anything that you want us to talk about on another session, also reach out to us. Like we will read anything you send us. And if there's something that we feel we can contribute, we're more than happy to bring it up and discuss it on the call. So thank you guys. Hope you had some fun listening to us just shoot the breeze together. And because it's a Friday for us, happy weekend. Take care, guys. We're going to sign off.